"You're out, Daniel." My buddy's taking over. My boss's words hit like a cheap shot. I'd make him choke on that smirk. I'm Daniel Foster, 36, a restaurant manager. My boss swapped me for his bar buddy, spitting on my years of loyalty. I thought hard work earned trust. Now I know, sometimes you have to burn the house down to be heard. The restaurant smelled of sizzling garlic and fresh bread as I pushed through the back door at 3 p.m., my shift starting like any other. 5 years as manager, I'd turned this place around. Schedules tight, staff sharp, customers coming back. At 36, I was the guy who kept the chaos in check, from late deliveries to drunk patrons. My office, a cramped room with a desk buried in schedules and invoices, was my command center. I'd earned every inch of it, working doubles, fixing Greg's screw-ups, making him look good to the owners. I thought I was solid, untouchable. Greg was in the kitchen when I arrived, leaning against the counter, laughing with a line cook. "Big night, Dan," he said, his grin too wide, his eyes darting. I nodded, chalking it up to his usual post-bar energy. He owned half the place, liked to play the cool boss. Drinks with the staff, loud stories about his weekend. I grabbed my clipboard, checking the night's reservations. The dining room buzzed, servers weaving through tables, the clink of glasses familiar, comforting. I was in my element, ready for the dinner rush. Then Greg called me to his office, a glass-walled box overlooking the bar. "Sit down, Daniel," he said, his voice flat. No trace of his usual charm. I sat, my gut tightening. "You're out. My buddy Shane's taking over as manager. Starts tomorrow." My breath stopped, the words landing like a punch. "Out? After 5 years of 60-hour weeks, training staff, boosting profits?" I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. None came. "It's just business," he said, shrugging, his smirk sharp. "Shane's got fresh energy. You're done." My hands gripped the chair, knuckles white, my pulse hammering in my ears. Done? I'd rebuilt the menu, saved thousands on vendor deals, kept this place afloat when Greg was too hungover to show up. My jaw clenched, words trapped in my throat. I wanted to shout, to list every late night, every crisis I'd handled. Instead, I stood, my legs unsteady, and walked out. The kitchen blurred past, staff glancing away, already sensing the shift. Greg's voice followed me. "Pack up by end of shift." 5 years? And he'd tossed me aside like a bad tip. I stood in my office, staring at my desk, photos of my nephew's birthday, a chipped mug from a staff Christmas party. The betrayal wasn't just the firing. It was the ease of it, the way Greg didn't even blink. I'd trusted him, thought loyalty meant something. My dad's voice echoed, "Work hard, Dan, and it'll pay off." It hadn't. I grabbed a box, my hands shaking, rage building under the hurt. Greg thought he'd won. He'd learn how wrong he was. Greg thought he could erase me with a smirk. But I was already planning to turn his game against him. The restaurant's dining room buzzed with the early dinner crowd, but the air in Greg's office still hung heavy. His words, "You're out, Daniel," like a stain I couldn't shake. I stood in my cramped office, hands trembling as I packed a box with my things. A chipped mug, a photo of my nephew, schedules I'd spent years perfecting. 5 years running this place, 60-hour weeks, salvaging Greg's bad calls, turning red ink to black, and he'd replaced me with Shane, his bar buddy, like I was nothing. My chest burned, my pulse a dull roar in my ears. Greg didn't let it end quietly. An hour later, he called a staff meeting in the break room, the smell of burnt coffee mixing with dishwater. "Meet Shane," he said, slinging an arm around a guy in a wrinkled polo, his grin too wide, his eyes glassy from last night's drinks. "New manager, fresh ideas, ready to take us up." The staff, servers I'd trained, cooks I'd backed during rushes, stared at the floor. Greg's eyes flicked to me, his smirk sharp. "Daniel's moving on. Let's give him a hand for his effort." A few clapped weakly, their hands barely meeting. Tara, a server I'd trusted, looked away, her jaw tight. The room felt like a stage, and I was the fool. "Anything to say, Dan?" Greg asked, his voice dripping with challenge. My throat closed, rage and shame choking me. I wanted to list every shift I'd covered, every profit I'd earned, every time I'd saved his ass. Instead, I shook my head, my voice locked away. "Good," he said, turning to Shane. "Let's get to work." The staff shuffled out, avoiding my gaze, their footsteps loud in the silence. Greg lingered, pretending to check his phone. "Just business, Dan," he said, not looking up. "Shane's my guy. Business. My hands tightened on the box, its edges biting my palms. He'd made it personal, parading me out like a failure. I carried the box to my car, the parking lot dark, the restaurant's neon sign flickering behind me. 5 years of loyalty, of making Greg look good, and he'd erased me in front of everyone. The humiliation wasn't just the firing, it was the performance, the way he'd made sure I felt small. I slid into the driver's seat, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the box rattling in the back. Greg thought he'd won, thought I'd fade away. But the rage boiling inside me wasn't loud. It was quiet, sharp, ready to cut. I'd find his weak spot and I'd make him pay. Greg thought his buddy could replace me, but he'd underestimated me. I was already hunting for his secrets. The drive home from the restaurant was a haze. Greg's smirk and Shane's glassy-eyed grin burned into my mind. I sat in my apartment, the box from my office dumped on the floor, the chipped mug staring at me like a reminder of 5 years wasted. My hands shook as I opened my laptop. The restaurant's scheduling app still logged in. They hadn't cut my access yet. A sloppy mistake like Greg's half-assed management. I wasn't just hurt. I was angry, the kind that settles deep, quiet, but heavy. He'd erased me for his drinking buddy, and I'd make him regret it. I started digging, scrolling through old emails and financial reports I'd been CC'd on. Greg had always been careless, leaving me to clean up his messes. Late vendor payments, botched orders. But now I saw patterns. Invoices for supplies we never received. Expenses logged twice, profits shrinking despite packed nights. My pulse quickened as I found a health inspection report he'd buried. Failed checks for kitchen sanitation. Ignored because Greg knew a guy. My jaw clenched. I'd fixed those violations myself, working weekends to keep us open while he took the credit. I texted Tara, the server who'd looked away during Greg's breakroom show. Know anything about Greg's books? I asked, my thumb hesitating over send. Her reply came fast. Call me. He's dirty. Her voice was low, tense, like she was watching her back. He's been skimming for years, she said. Cash tips, fake invoices, even bribed an inspector. She'd kept quiet, scared of losing her job, but had screenshots. Texts from Greg about cooking the books. Receipts that didn't match. My hands went cold gripping the phone. This wasn't just incompetence. It was fraud, and he'd pinned losses on me to cover it. I saved everything to a flash drive. My apartment silent except for the hum of my fridge. Exposing Greg could tank his stake in the restaurant, maybe land him in legal trouble. But the risk was real. If he traced this back, I'd be the bitter ex-manager, blacklisted in the industry. My savings were thin, my career built on trust. I pictured the staff's averted eyes, Greg's just business shrug, Shane's smug grin. They thought I was done. I wasn't. Tara's text buzzed again. You in or out? My throat tightened. In meant war, out meant letting Greg win. I thought of my dad's advice. Work hard, Dan. It pays off. It hadn't. But this fight, might. I leaned back, the flash drive heavy in my hand, the mug's crack staring back. Greg wasn't untouchable. He was sloppy and I had the proof. But one wrong move and I'd be the one burned. Greg's secrets were mine, but so was the danger. Could Tara and I bring him down, or was I walking into his trap? The fluorescent lights in my apartment buzzed as I sat at my kitchen table. My laptop open. Tara's screenshots and my files spread across the screen like a map of Greg's lies. Fake invoices for supplies we never got. Cash tips siphoned into his pocket. A health inspection report he'd paid to bury. Each piece was a nail in his coffin. My hands trembled as I organized them. The chipped mug from the restaurant sitting beside me. A reminder of 5 years erased by Greg's just business smirk. His betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a betrayal of everyone who'd trusted him. Staff, owners, customers. Tara came over after her shift, her apron still smelling of fryer grease. This is enough to sink him, she said, her voice low, eyes scanning my cramped living room. She'd brought more. A text from Greg bragging about dodging a vendor payment. A photo of a health code violation he'd laughed off. We built a dossier, cold and airtight, dates, amounts, proof of his fraud, all backed by Tara's screenshots and my access to the restaurant's records. My pulse raced as I saved it to a flash drive, my coffee cold on the table. We were targeting the restaurant's owners and their biggest supplier, a company that had dropped Greg if they knew he was cooking the books. We go anonymous, I said, My jaw tight. No traces. Tara nodded, showing me how to route the email through a secure server she'd used for a side hustle. If Greg finds out, he'll come for us, she warned, her fingers pausing on her phone. My stomach twisted. Greg was connected, slippery, half-owner, friends with local big shots. If this backfired, I'd be blacklisted. My career as a restaurant manager done. My savings were thin, my future tied to my name. But I saw his smirk in the break room, Shane's glassy-eyed grin, the staff's silence. Greg had made me nothing. I wasn't nothing. We drafted the email. Evidence of Greg Harlan's financial misconduct and health code violations. No emotion. Just facts: 20,000 in skimmed cash. 3 failed inspections hidden. Vendor payments diverted. My hands shook as I read it, picturing Greg's face when it landed. Tara leaned back, her face tense. This'll ruin him, his stake, his reputation. Ruin. The word felt right but heavy. Doubt crept in like a draft. What if he spun this, painted me as the disgruntled ex-employee? I'd seen him charm his way out of worse. But his "you're out" echoed and my resolve hardened. I saved the dossier, the flash drive heavy in my hand. Tara's voice cut through. You sure, Daniel? I nodded, my throat dry. Greg thought he'd buried me. He was about to learn what a nobody could do. The dossier was ready to torch Greg's world, but one slip could burn me too. Was I ready to hit send? I hit send on the dossier at 1 a.m., the email vanishing through Tara's secure server, packed with Greg's lies, $20,000 skimmed, buried health violations, fake invoices. My apartment was dark, the chipped mug on my table catching the laptop's glow. My pulse thundered as I stared at the sent confirmation, a spark I'd lit to burn Greg's world down. Tara texted an hour later. Suppliers furious. They got it. My breath caught. The restaurant's biggest supplier, a company that kept us stocked with everything from wine to steak, was ready to walk. I pictured Greg in his glass office, his smirk gone, phone glued to his ear. By morning, Tara's updates rolled in. Owners called an emergency audit. Greg's losing it. The restaurant was in chaos, staff whispering, deliveries stalled, auditors combing through records. Our dossier, with its airtight proof of Greg's fraud, had hit like a grenade. A local news site posted a vague headline. Downtown eatery faces financial probe. I leaned back on my couch, the trailer's hum steady, my hands cold. 5 years of my life, schedules, late nights, saving Greg's ass, and I'd turned it against him. My silence, my evidence, was louder than any shout. But fear crept in, sharp as the coffee I hadn't touched. Greg was a half-owner, connected, slick. Tara texted. He's asking about you, digging. My stomach twisted. We'd hidden our tracks, encrypted files, anonymous email. But Greg was a snake, and snakes bite when cornered. If he traced this to me, I'd be the bitter ex-manager, my name trashed in the industry. My savings were thin, my career built on trust. I paced my apartment, the floor creaking, the flash drive heavy in my pocket. Every car outside made me flinch, half expecting Greg to show up. His charm turned to venom. Tara's next message hit harder. Suppliers out. $100,000 contract gone. Greg's empire was crumbling. Another supplier was wavering, the audit uncovering more of his scams. I could see him now, sweating in a meeting, his just business excuse falling apart. My anger burned, but so did doubt. Was this justice or revenge? I'd wanted him to feel what I felt, erased, small, but the cost was real. The restaurant, the staff, the life I'd built there. They were collateral damage. I gripped the mug, its crack rough under my thumb, and thought of the break room. Shane's grin, Greg's smirk. They'd made me nothing. Now I was something. The phone buzzed again. Tara. Auditors found more. He's done. My heart raced, triumph mixing with dread. Greg was falling, but he wasn't out. I'd lit the spark, but the fire could still burn me. Greg's world was collapsing, but he was still fighting. Could I stay hidden, or would his desperation find me? The news hit like a shot of whiskey. Greg was out. Tara's text came at dawn, short and sharp. Owners stripped Greg's stake. He's done. My heart pounded as I sat in my apartment, the chipped mug on the table catching the morning light. The dossier, $20,000 skimmed, buried health violations, fake invoices, had done its work. The restaurant's owners, furious at the audit's findings, had forced Greg to sell his share at a loss. The supplier was gone, another followed, and a third was threatening to sue. A local news site updated, restaurant co-owner ousted amid fraud allegations. I leaned back, a grin tugging at my lips, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. Shane, Greg's drinking buddy, was drowning in the manager role. Tara's updates painted a mess, missed orders, angry staff, customers walking out. The team I'd trained, the systems I'd built were falling apart without me. Servers who'd avoided my eyes in the break room now admitted I'd held the place together. Tara called, her voice bright. "They know it was you, Dan, not the dossier, but your work. You're clear." My throat tightened. 5 years of 60-hour weeks fixing Greg's messes had meant something. I'd been erased, but now my name was clean. Then my phone rang, a number I didn't know. "Daniel Foster? This is Lisa from the bistro," a woman said, her tone crisp. "We need a manager who can run a tight ship." Interested? The bistro was a rival spot. Upscale, with a bigger budget and better hours. My yes came out before I could think, my voice steady but my pulse racing. The offer was a step up. More pay, more control, a fresh start. I hung up, staring at the mug, its crack a badge of what I'd survived. Greg was ruined, Shane was failing, and I was rising. Justice tasted sharp, like the coffee I'd forgotten to drink. But as the high faded, the weight settled in. Greg's downfall was my doing, and it wasn't clean. I pictured him packing his office, no smirk, no charm, just a man who'd bet on the wrong buddy. His reputation was ash, blacklisted in the industry, his connections gone. I'd wanted him to feel what I felt, small, discarded, but the cost lingered. The restaurant, the staff, the life I'd poured into it, they were collateral damage. My dad's words echoed, "Work hard, Dan, it pays off." It had, but not the way he'd meant. I'd won, but the betrayal scars ran deep. I stood, the flash drive with the dossier still in my pocket, its work done. I'd burned Greg's house down, but the smoke clung to me. Triumph felt good, but it wasn't enough to fill the hole he'd left. Greg was finished, and I was back on top. But could I outrun the shadow of what I'd lost? The bistro's dining room hummed under my watch. The clink of glasses and murmur of happy customers, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. A week into my new job as manager, I was already tightening schedules, streamlining orders, earning nods from the staff. At 36, I'd landed on my feet. Better pay, more respect, a fresh start. But as I locked up my new office, the chipped mug from my old restaurant sat on my desk. Its crack a reminder of Greg's betrayal. I'd won, but the victory wasn't clean. Tara's texts kept me updated on the fallout. Greg was gone, his ownership stake sold for pennies, his name poison in the industry. "Restaurant co-owner faces fraud charges," a news headline read, his mugshot splashed online. Shane, his drinking buddy, was a disaster. Orders botched, staff quitting, the restaurant bleeding money. The crew I'd trained now spoke my name with respect, admitting I'd been the backbone. Tara called, her voice warm. "You're a legend, Dan. They know you were the real deal." My chest tightened, a mix of pride and pain. 5 years of my life, late nights, fixed messes, had meant something, even if Greg had tried to erase it. I stood in the bistro's kitchen, watching my new team move like clockwork, my systems already taking root. A supplier I'd worked with before stopped by, shaking my hand. "Heard about your old place," he said. "You're better off here." He was right, but the sting lingered. Greg's "you're out," Shane's glassy grin, the staff's silence in that break room. I'd brought Greg down with that dossier. His skimmed cash, buried violations, all laid bare. His career was ash, his connections gone, his life a wreck. I'd done that quietly from the shadows, and it felt just. But the cost was there, in the trust I'd lost, the years I'd given to a place that let me fall. My phone buzzed, a new client meeting, another chance to build. I set the mug down, its crack catching the light. I wasn't the guy who'd walked into Greg's restaurant a month ago, thinking loyalty was enough. I was harder now, sharper, my eyes open. Greg's downfall was a warning to anyone who'd try to diminish me again. I wasn't invisible. I walked out to the dining room, the bistro alive under my command, and felt the ground solid beneath me. I'd reclaimed my place not just in the industry but in myself. But as I turned off the lights, the betrayal's shadow lingered. I'd stood tall, but the scars were deep, and I'd carry them forward, guarding my future with a fierceness I hadn't known I had. I'd risen above Greg's betrayal, stronger than ever. But could I ever shake the weight of what he'd taken? The bistro's kitchen buzzed as I locked up, the clatter of dishes fading into the night. A month into my new role as manager, I'd turned the place into a machine, staff sharp, profits up, my name earning nods of respect. At 36, I'd rebuilt what Greg tried to take, my office a testament to my grit. But the chipped mug from my old restaurant sat on my desk, its crack a silent echo of his betrayal. I'd won, but the victory sat heavy like a weight I couldn't shake. Greg was done. Tara's last text sealed it. He's vanished. Blacklisted everywhere. His ownership stake was gone, sold for nothing, his name tied to fraud charges across the industry. The restaurant he'd run was crumbling. Shane's mismanagement drove away customers, staff quitting in droves. My dossier, $20,000 skimmed hidden health violations, fake invoices, had torn his world apart. From my apartment, with Tara's help, I'd brought him down without ever showing my face. I pictured him now, no smirk, no connections, just a man broken by his own lies. Justice felt cold, precise, earned, but the scars remained. Greg's "you're out," Shane's smug grin. The staff's averted eyes in that break room, they cut deeper than I'd let on. I'd trusted Greg. Believed loyalty and late nights would mean something. My dad's advice, work hard, Dan, it pays off, when it had been wrong or at least twisted. I'd paid with 5 years, poured into a place that discarded me. The dossier was my fight back, but it didn't heal the mistrust, the part of me that expected another knife. I was different now, harder, watchful, my faith in fairness gone. I stepped into the cool night, the city quiet, my phone buzzing with a new vendor deal. I left the mug on the desk, its crack a badge of what I'd overcome. I was Daniel Foster, the man who'd burned a trader's empire and built a new one. No one, not Greg, not anyone, would diminish me again. My future was mine, guarded by a resolve I hadn't known I had. The pain lingered, but so did my strength, carved from the fight I'd won. Greg was ruined, and I stood stronger than ever. But could I outrun the mistrust he'd left behind?